Hello and welcome back to One-on-One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. I'm Chris Boccia with Kayla Wentzel, and we are very pleased to have a special guest this evening, Sal Marchiano. Sal, the broadcasting legend of sports. He's been at just about every network, covered just about every sport, and just about every legendary athlete. So, Sal, first of all, thanks so much for taking the time today.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So I want to get started with where we are right now. Just had Super Bowl 55 in the rearview mirror, and Tom Brady gets his 7th ring. You've covered so many legends of sports, and my question is, you watch a guy like Tom Brady go do it again. How does he stack up to some of the guys that you've covered over the years?
You know, his numbers cannot be refuted. He's won 7 Super Bowls out of 10 opportunities. 5 most valuable player awards in the Super Bowl. He and Gronkowski combined on touchdowns 14 and 15 in this past game, surpassing the record held by Joe Montana and Jerry Rice. He's been a winner everywhere, and P.S., he did it at age 43. So as far as I'm concerned, he is the greatest quarterback of all time. And no one I think can argue that.
No, he definitely is such a legend. But you have worked with other legends before. We saw that you had worked with Muhammad Ali, and you've met him and you've interviewed him. So what is your best experience really with one of these great athletes? Like, what was one of your favorite memories of talking to such a legend?
Because I worked at ABC as Howard Cosell's backup on boxing and his nightly local and network radio shows, whenever Howard couldn't make them, I did them. And I did so many blow-by-blow of the boxing that I ended up doing that for ABC Sports. And because Howard would not go to the Philippines for the Thriller in Manila because it was under martial law, I got the assignment, and I hosted Wide World of Sports from Manila 2 days before the fight. The biggest scoop I ever had as a reporter was with Muhammad Ali. On the night of February 18th, 1978, at the Las Vegas Hilton, Ali lost his championship to Leon Spinks and would not come to the news conference afterwards. And this is what all young reporters should think about. Never give up. I took my film crew up to his suite, knocked on the door. His security guy, Pat Patterson, who I knew, came to the door. I asked him, I'd like to speak to Muhammad. He said, I'll let you know. So he came back. He said, yeah, it's okay. Come on in. And I did a sit-down interview with Ali the night he lost his championship. And it was an exclusive interview that was seen the next morning on Good Morning America and then on World News Tonight. And that's the kind of relationship I had with him. He was the most charismatic figure of that time.
Another person that you interviewed that I noticed was Hank Aaron, among many others. And of course, we lost Hank Aaron this year. Do you have any reflections on your interviews with him?
I interviewed Hank about a half dozen times, almost every time at Shea Stadium before games. Those are the days where you could speak to an athlete on the field during batting practice. There were no such things as mass news conferences like now. And you could just walk up to a guy and say, you got a couple minutes, I'd like to talk to you. So I got to know him, and we did interviews. They were all about baseball. There was nothing extraordinary about them except that, of course, he was very, very gracious and very polite and answered every question. Next to Willie Mays, I thought that Hank Aaron was the most talented player, what they call in baseball, the 5 tools. He could do everything. And, of course, I saw Hank when I was a kid at Ebbets Field in Brooklyn when Henry broke in. And I was amazed at his talent, as I was amazed at Willie Mays' talent. So the long answer to your question, I knew Henry in a professional way. He was a very nice man, yes.
So the pandemic has obviously shut down all of these stadiums, and so there haven't been any fans. But recently, I think maybe just yesterday, Governor Cuomo said that fans were going to be able to start entering stadiums again. So, like MSG or other places. So, how do you see this really like helping the athletes? And as a broadcaster, what does it do for you when there are fans in the seats?
I just heard some sound bites just last week from players on the Chiefs and on the Bucks saying that they missed having fans in the stands because the cheering energizes them. So they really, in the end of this remarkable season we just had, you know, it worked, but it was like playing football in a studio. And I think everybody was going to welcome back the crowd noise, because whether they like you or they don't, it does inspire you to play better. I hope that it's safe enough for everybody. None of us could have predicted what this is all about. And we all yearn for the day we all can go back and go out and watch a ball game and sit with a person next to us and just chat about the game, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're a Fordham alumnus, and I want to take you back to your days here at Fordham. What they meant to you, what you were able to learn that you then took to a 40-year career of broadcasting. And Marty Glickman, I know, was a mentor of yours. If you could speak to that as well.
Well, you know, growing up in Brooklyn, I went to St. John's Prep, but as a young teenager, I'm talking about 12, 13 years old, I was enraptured by radio. And I certainly listened to the Brooklyn Dodgers baseball games and pre and post. And I had it in my mind that I wanted to be a broadcaster, but I had no definite idea how it would be, in what form. I didn't think I'd ever become a team broadcaster, but I realized that I didn't want to go get the free pass from St. John's and go to the university. I wanted to go to Fordham, which had WFUV. So I applied and was accepted at Fordham, and I enjoyed every minute that I could get on WFUV. I did the basketball games when John Andrews was starting forward, with Johnny Bach was the coach. They went to the NIT. I actually broadcast a game from Madison Square Garden, which was an absolute thrill for me to do that, as it would be for you. And as far as I was concerned, I went to Fordham, but I went to the University of WFUV. That was, and of course, I made my contacts, and I learned a lot. And this leads me to the subject of, I'm very proud of my education at Fordham, because while I wasn't a remarkable student, I was an average student. I learned a lot there, and I also learned and understood that you are the sum total of your knowledge. And Fordham got me into reading books of all kinds, and I saw that in the work of Vince Scully, the greatest Fordham alumnus in terms of broadcasting. Because if you listen to Vince Scully do a baseball game, not only was he had a great voice and a great melody, and he certainly knew the game, but his references were about other things in life. He would quote poets, and he would quote historians, and he made it so interesting because he read. And that would be my advice to any broadcasters, certainly writers. You've got to read books. You've got, and not necessarily just about sports, about other subjects. Become a well-rounded individual to increase your vocabulary, to use words. Words are your bullets, and that's how you succeed. And so it all happened because of Fordham. Fordham was the most influence on me in my life was Fordham, my education there.
That's awesome, and that's incredible for us to hear. I mean, especially working at FUV and just seeing how far WFUV could really take you in your life.
Never forget these days that you're experiencing.
We will try not to, for sure. So as you had talked about Fordham and you talked about broadcasting from Madison Square Garden and working with the basketball team, what really was your favorite Fordham FUV sporting event memory?
Well, I was what they call a day hopper. I worked that night at WMGM. I mentioned with Marty Glickman, and I did not board at Fordham, so I was up there for classes and then out of there. In 4 years at Fordham, I went to one dance, and because I worked, I had to pay for my tuition. My family didn't have the money, and I paid for my schooling. And I had very little experience with Fordham socially. I made some friends. The most noted one was John Halligan. We were in the same class for 4 years, and John's his love was for hockey, and he ended up working. We both used to take the D train down to Manhattan after class, and he went to the Associated Press, and I went to WMGM. This went on for our careers at Fordham, and John ended up working for the New York Rangers as an intern, and he ended up being the public relations director, and he ended up being an executive with the National Hockey League. And that happened to a Fordham student, so small beginnings, big endings.
Yes, and we find it across the board with the alumni that we talk to all the time. No matter where they started at FUV, they seem to always end up in a tremendous place. Certainly the case for you. For a young reporter, what would you tell a young reporter as far as advice goes? Because you mentioned the play-by-play of Vince Scully. I think is fascinating how somebody once told me that if you read the transcripts of Vince Scully and his play-by-play, it'd almost be like he wrote it on a typewriter. He just was a poet as he spoke live. But as a reporter, what's your advice? What did you learn in your career?
Well, the basics are who, what, when, and where. But the big question is why. And to know why in the story, to know what's the real story, takes experience, and experience can only be developed by knowing the subjects, knowing the backgrounds. The great reporters that became name reporters like Jimmy Breslin and Pete Hamill, they went beyond the obvious pronouncements at news conferences. The best advice I get is to talk to the principals, to get the story behind the story. I'll give you an example. The greatest Jimmy Breslin column was when John Kennedy was assassinated, and Jimmy flew down to Dallas. He interviewed everybody, and everybody was writing the same thing. I mean, it was obvious, okay? But the day of the JFK's funeral, Jimmy's column was about the gravedigger. And it told its own story, because the gravedigger had the solemn and terrible task of digging out the hole in the ground for JFK. And the gravedigger evoked such emotion, like we all were feeling at the time that we lost our president. And that's how, Jimmy understood that the story isn't necessarily the big guy or the big woman or the obvious person behind the podium. The story could be the little guy, the little woman, the workaday person. So, that's a long answer, but you only can determine that by experience, and get beyond news conferences, get to know the subjects, the personalities and the subjects, and read.
Full of advice. We really, really appreciate it. And certainly you've built up the experience. If anybody listening wants to buy your book, it's In My Rearview Mirror. I'd recommend it to get some of these stories. We thank you so much for the time. Sal Marchiano.
Yeah, good luck with your careers.
Thank you very much.